that's a little bit of Naima. I recently posted a whole lesson on this. I'll include a link to that lesson in the description down below. I want to talk a little bit more about this tune, in particular the chord structure, which is all something called slash chords. What I mean by that, like this first chord, on paper, we would write that as D flat major 7. You can see there's your D flat major 7 slash E flat. Now, when we talk about this, we don't say the slash. Just like if you were reading out loud from a book, you wouldn't say period or comma or open quotation mark or things like that. Instead, we would just say over. So on paper, this is D flat major 7 slash E flat. But just when we're talking about it, we would say D flat major 7 over E flat. E flat is just the bass note. Not a whole E flat chord, but just the bass note. And this tune, all of the chords in it can be looked at that way. This is the second chord. We could call this G flat major 7 over E flat. Now, if you know your jazz chords on the guitar, you could also look at this and say, well, that's E flat minor 9. Right? That's the root, the flat third, the flat 7, and the 9. And that first chord, too, maybe you could argue that this chord is simply E flat 13. So here's your 13. There's a dominant chord. It's got the 9. It's got the 13. And then instead of the third, it's got a fourth. So we could call this E flat 13 sus 4. That would be correct. And we could call this E flat minor 9. And then let's look at the next two chords. They are this. So what are those? This is, if we were just going to name this as some kind of E flat chord, you could say that it's E flat minor 7 flat 5 with an 11. So if you know this as a E flat minor 7 flat 5 chord, instead of having the third on top, we'd have the 11. There's probably another way to look at that chord, but just grip-wise, that's how it strikes me as being related to this. So I would call it E flat minor 7 flat 5 parenthetical 11. You know, you could also play all of this, and if you use your middle finger to get the E flat and the D flat, you could put the 11 back here. But this sounds a little bit more like what I think the original recording, the harmony is something like that. And then this upper part moves down a whole step, and the bass note stays the same. So if we look at this chord, it would be E flat augmented sharp 9. I would be inclined to call this E flat 7 sharp 9 sharp 5. So there's your sharp 5. There's your sharp 9. We don't get to hear the 7 chord or the note that makes this a dominant chord if we play it this way. There's no D flat in it. But I think your ear would suggest that. And then that goes to A flat major 7. And I'm playing here E flat, A flat, open G, E flat, and then grabbing the low A flat, sort of unusual fingering. Sorry if you can't see my right hand here. It's hard to get everything in frame. I'll do it one more time at this funny angle so you can see everything. So. But here's the thing. If we try to name all of these chords from the root up, you wouldn't be conveying to somebody reading the chart if you weren't there. If you just sent the chart to somebody or published it somewhere, that there's this constant structure of these major seven sounds. Those are all major seven chords with a constant bass note, this E flat, until you get to the A flat and resolves in the measure 7 and 8. And that's why we need slash chord notation, so that it would make it more clear to somebody playing the tune, hey, this is the architecture of the tune. It might show them, it might indicate that you want the voicings to have this major 7-y sound. Like otherwise, E flat 13 sus, there's a lot of different ways you could voice that you might not wind up with that particular sound. Whereas if you say it's a major 7 chord with the lower notes, like, just it helps indicate the structure and also a little bit about the voicing. Not specifically, but let me start with something simpler, because this for some people is already going to be a little bit confusing. But if you are familiar with this kind of chord, this is a C major 7 chord, right? We don't think of this as a slash chord, but you could, because if you take away the C root note of a C major 7, you're playing E minor. E, G, B. This is you could say a first inversion E minor triad over C. We probably wouldn't write it that way on a chart, because that's unnecessarily confusing, since there's already a conventional name for this chord. We call it C major 7. But it is, in a way, a slash chord. And any other voicing of C major 7 has E minor in it. This one does, or same voicing on a different string set. Here's your E minor. This C major 7 voicing has this E minor. It's harder to see C major 7 here. It's harder to see the E minor because it's broken out. Like here's E, G, B, and we've got this C kind of hidden inside the chord, but you can still see there is an E minor chord there. So, and the same is true of all the common 7th chords. This is C minor 7. There's an E flat triad there. Or C minor 7 flat 5 has an E flat minor triad. C7 has an E diminished triad. So we're playing, in a way you could say we're playing slash chords all the time if you're playing music that uses these kinds of chords, 7th chords. But by writing them as slash chords, it just gives us a little indication of what the chart maker's intent was, which is to have the triadic sound or the 7th chord sound up top. So in this case, C major 7 over D, or in Naima, D flat major 7 over E flat. We've got all this stuff on top of this. We're not trying to scramble it around so that you don't hear it as a major 7 chord. You want that sound because that's what makes it pretty. That's what kind of, you're offering to the listener, here's a pretty thing that you know, but I'm going to do so. There's kind of like a Trojan horse situation where, here's this pretty sound and your ear will go, oh, cool, I know that sound. I like that sound. But by hiding this bass note a little bit behind it, you're actually presenting a different sound than just a simple major 7. So this would be G flat major 7 over E flat, A major 7. I'm not playing a 5th here because the 5th of A flat major 7, A major 7, the 5th is E, and that's not going to sound great with this E flat. So I'm playing a version of A major 7 that doesn't have a 5th, because I don't want to rub the E natural against that E flat. So I have this. That's A major 7 with no fifth over E flat. And this is G major 7, again with no fifth, over E flat. And then I've seen some people say that, oh, well, what this chord really is G major 7 sharp 5. You know, so G major 7, and then the sharp 5 is in the bass. That's, you could say, D sharp. And that is true, that this is a G major 7 sharp 5. But functionally, the next chord is A flat. So if you saw that on paper, G major 7 sharp 5 over E flat, going to A flat major 7, your brain would tell you that these two chords don't have any obvious relationship. And so you might be scrambling to figure out what scales to play. But if you look at this as a G major 7 over E flat, or over D sharp maybe, then you might recognize that, oh, it's kind of E melodic minor, but with starting from the E flat or D sharp, which gives us kind of an altered dominant sound. E flat 7 with the sharp 9 and the sharp 5. And then that chord makes sense. E flat 7 with any kind of alterations or not, going to A flat makes a lot of sense. So E flat 7 going to A flat, your brain knows exactly what's happening. So I think of this part here as kind of just like an enclosure, like an enclosure of chords. We're trying to get to here, to A flat major 7, and we just go a half step above, a half step below, and then we get where we're going. So it's like a chromatic enclosure. Instead of just of this one note, we drag the whole chord around, and I call that like a chordal enclosure. And it's all setting our ear up to go back to this A flat. So we could say, like, this is the one chord. Song starts on 5, then goes to 5 minor, and then enclosure with a pedal tone. So let's do it in another key. So let's do it in C. So it starts on 5, that kind of 5 dominant 7 sus, and then 5 minor. And then we want to get back to, so we're trying to get back to C major 7. So D flat major 7 over G, B major 7 over G, C. It's very simplified, but that's kind of what the tune would be. So we, again, in C would be like, let's do it in another key. Let's do it in A. So 5 chord, which I'm playing as D over E, and then 5 minor, which would be like G major 7 over E. And let's see, what's next? We want to get back to A major 7, so we're going to go B flat major 7 over E, A flat major 7 over E, and back to A major 7. I'll do it again, and I'll leave the fifths out, because if you remember, I was saying on those last couple of chords, we'll leave the fifth out. So D major 7 over E, G major 7 over E, or E minor 9, and then B flat major 7 over E, but without the fifth, A flat major 7 over E without the fifth, and then A major 7 So I hope that you have two takeaways from this. One is that slash chords are not rocket science. And also, as per just the last minute or two of what I've been showing you, it can really illuminate any tune, especially jazz tunes, but any kind of tune, to play them in some different keys, find them in some different registers on the guitar. Sometimes looking at a tune in a different key can help put it together for you so you have a better, more clear understanding of what the movements are. You're not just memorizing up 3 frets, down 4 frets, across these strings. This, it's not just shapes, but it's, if you can play it in different keys and in different registers, I think ultimately you're going to have more music at your fingertips. So there you go. Slash chords, not rocket science.